Saint Hubert, Hermit, Bishop of Liege, 727, Voeren, Belgium. As I took up his relics, I saw the holy bishop. He said, that is my bone. I'm Hubert. Then I had visions of his life, and I saw him as a boy in a solitary old castle surrounded by a moat. He wore a close-fitting suit and roamed with his crossbow in forest and field shooting birds, which he afterward gave to the sick around the castle. I often saw him cautiously crossing the moat on a floating plank to distribute his alms. Then I saw him a young married man in a distant country, joining with many others in a great hunt. He wore a leathern cap. On his breast hung a bent tube, over his shoulder a crossbow, and in his hand he carried a light spear. The huntsmen all had little tawny dogs. I saw a large one at Hubert's side. He also had a sort of barrow between two asses on which to take home the game. The hunters crossed a vast, wild district to the scene of action, a broad plain near a running stream. Hubert and his dogs followed a small yellow stag for a long time. But, when the dogs had nearly overtaken it, they ran back to their master whining as if to tell him something. The stag paused, looked at Hubert, started on again pursued by the dogs until the latter, as before, ran back to their master. This they repeated several times. At last, Hubert set the hounds of his fellow sportsmen on it. But they, too, came running back whining. Hubert's eagerness increased, and he noticed now that the stag grew larger and larger. He renewed the chase more ardently than before until he was far ahead of his companions, following the stag, which still seemed to increase in size. He pursued it to a dense thicket. Here he thought it would entangle its horns and be unable to proceed, but, to his surprise, the animal pressed through without difficulty, whilst he himself, accustomed to clear all sorts of hedges, followed only with effort. And now the stag paused. There he stood, large and beautiful, in color like a yellow horse, with long silken hair on his neck. Hubert stood on his right, his spear raised to strike, when suddenly the animal cast upon him a glance full of gentleness, and behold, right between its antlers, shone a dazzling crucifix. Hubert sank on his knees and sounded his horn. When his companions came up, they found him unconscious. The apparition was still visible. But soon the crucifix vanished, the stag resumed its original size and disappeared. Then I saw Hubert borne back to the house on the barrow between the asses. He was a Christian. His father seemed to be an impoverished duke, for his castle was greatly out of repair. When a boy, Hubert had had in a wilderness an apparition of a youth who invited him to follow him alone. But the happy impression then produced had been dispelled by his love for the chase. On another occasion he pursued the lamb until the little creature took shelter in a thorn bush. Hubert built a fire around it, but the flames and smoke turned upon himself, leaving the lamb unharmed. Hubert was taken back so ill that it was thought he would die. He was deeply contrite, and he promised, if God would prolong his life, he would hereafter serve him faithfully. He recovered, his wife died, and I saw him clothed in a hermit's garb. He was favored with a vision in which he received as a reward for his self-victory that all the ardor and energy of his baneful passions should be changed into the gift of healing. By the imposition of hands he cured both soul and body of all maladies engendered by wrath, fury, or thirst for blood. He even cured brute animals. He laid his girdle in the jaws of mad dogs, and they were instantly cured. I saw him baking and blessing little loaves, round for men, oblong for brutes, with which he cured madness. I saw, as a certain fact, that whoever confidently invokes this saint will be protected by his merits and healing power against the attacks of rage and madness. I saw Hubert also in Rome, and the Pope, in consequence of a vision, consecrating him bishop. Amen.